This video is about solving linear equations using one step. All right. So when we solve equations, we've got 5 different equations here. They all require one step to solve. We're going to use what's called inverse operations. Okay. So we're going to think about what's happening to the variable. In most cases, we're going to call it x. We're going to think about what's happening to the variable, and we're going to use inverse operations to undo that. Okay. So the inverse operation for addition is subtraction. The inverse of subtraction is addition. The inverse of multiplication is division. And the inverse of division is multiplication, okay? So we're going to use these inverse operations to help us solve for the variable. And again, in each of these cases, that variable is x. Okay, now, whether or not you can solve these equations using mental math is totally irrelevant. You want to learn how to use these inverse operations to solve equations. You're not going to be able to use mental math to solve a lot of equations. You're going to have to use these algebraic steps, in this case the inverse operations, to get x by itself, okay? So in this first one, let's think about what's happening to the variable x. So this says x plus 9 equals 11, okay? You may already know mentally what the answer is, but we want to work out the steps to show how we get that answer, okay? So what's happening to x is that we're adding 9 to it, okay? So we want to use the inverse operation. Well, the inverse of this addition that's happening is subtraction. So we want to subtract 9, okay? Well, if we do that to the left side, we have to do that to the right side. It maintains equilibrium. It keeps the sides of the equation balanced, okay? This is the left side. This is the right side. We always want to keep those balanced, all right? So now what I want to do is I want to combine these, all right? And I want to simplify that. Well, those cancel out, okay? Because 9 and negative 9 combine to get 0. And that's isolated x. It's got an x by itself over here. Well, on the right side, I simplify. I've got 11 minus 9, and that gives me 2. So my answer is x equals 2. Now, again, mentally, you may have been able to solve that earlier without going through these steps. But again, I promise you're going to want to be able to do these steps when the equations get more difficult, okay? You always want to check your work. Let's plug 2 back in for x. 2 plus 9 equals 11. That's true. So this answer is good to go. Okay? Let's look at the second one here. X minus 5 equals negative 21. All right, so what's happening to x is we're subtracting 5 from it. So in order to get x by itself, in order to isolate x, we're going to want to use the inverse. So the inverse of subtraction is addition. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. Okay? Now, again, the reason we do that is because when we use those inverse operations, these are going to cancel out. A negative 5 and a positive 5 cancels out, okay? So on the left side, that's going to leave me with x. On the right side, I get negative 21 plus 5, which is negative 16, okay? As always, we want to check our answer. Let's plug in negative 16 for x. You can use your calculator if you need to. Negative 16 minus 5 is negative 21. That's true. So this answer has to be correct, okay? Third equation, negative 5 times x. When you see these, a constant, a number here, right beside of a variable, that means there's multiplication happening. So this means negative 5 times x equals 40, okay? So the inverse of multiplication is division. So in order to undo this negative 5 times x to get x by itself, I want to divide both sides by negative 5, okay? When I do that, negative 5 divided by negative 5 is positive 1. Those cancel out, okay? So it leaves me with x. It gets that x alone, isolates it on the left side. On the right, I get 40 divided by negative 5, which is negative 8. So this is the answer for this equation. Check your work. Negative 5 times negative 8 is positive 40. So this is true, okay? Another one with multiplication, this time a positive number instead of a negative number. 8 times x, the inverse of multiplication is division, okay? So I'm going to divide both sides by 8, okay? Those 8's on the left side cancel out. That leaves me x by itself. On the right side, negative 64 divided by positive 8 is negative 8, okay? So in this problem, x equals negative 8. Check your work. 8 times negative 8 is negative 64. All right, and finally here, I've got 1/2 times x equals 2. if you've got a fraction as the coefficient, okay, coefficient just means the number in front of the variable, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, okay? So we want to multiply both sides by 2 over 1, or 2, okay? Well, on the left side, these 2's cancel out, and that leaves me with 1x, which is what I want. I always want my x by itself. 1x means I just have x. On the right side, I've got 2 times 2, which is 4, so x equals 4. Okay, check your work. 1/2 of 4, well, half of 4 we know is 2. That's a true statement, so that has to be the answer, okay? So that's how you use inverse operations to solve one-step equations.